Hello, my name is Lindsey Parker. I'm an 8th grade English Language Arts teacher at the Global Learning Charter Public School in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and I'm really excited to share with you all today some of the student-centered strategies that I use for project-based learning in my classroom. So fortunately enough, I'm lucky to be right in the middle of this particular project with my current 8th grade students. So I figured I would start sort of where I start them at the beginning of the project, and as I move through, it will sort of mimic how I move through this particular project with my class, and I'll also show you some examples of student work and some conversations, some video clips of students working on the different student-centered strategies. So in the beginning, I share with them, of course, our goals, and as you can see, there's 3 up here, one of which is to create a museum-worthy exhibit that represents important and interesting information about the topic they have chosen to research. So with this being a student-centered project, they're definitely given a lot of opportunity to have input about what their product looks like, what they choose to research, and what they choose to present to others. Here we have some objectives that just align with the Common Core standards for the 8th grade English Language Arts. And of course our language objectives, which I'm very fortunate enough to work on with the ELD teacher for our grade. We have a lot of time this year for collaboration, and she's great about providing feedback, especially when it comes to developing these objectives for L students. And we work together a lot to implement some extra supports when we need to. So why project-based for this particular assignment? For this particular topic, I think project-based learning works really well because there's so much information about the Holocaust to learn, but we cannot dedicate the amount of time that it would take to teach all of that information. So the project in this case, for the museum, acts as a vehicle for teaching students the background information that they need to understand the literature we're going to be reading moving forward. Which includes The Diary of a Young Girl. We read both the original diary as well as a graphic novel version, and we also read The Boy in the Striped Pajamas by John Boyne. And my honors class will also select a novel of their choice, which I'll sort of get into a little bit later. So why student-centered learning strategies? So in this case, I know there's kind of a few definitions about what student-centered learning means, but in this case it includes just some different strategies that shift the responsibility of instruction from the teacher to the students. Students have a sense of ownership of the material they're learning. They're deciding what to discuss and research further. They're given opportunities to make choices about their own learning, and they can also contribute to the design of their learning experiences, which I think is super important. And as a teacher, we can simply guide them towards topics. We let them decide which information they want to research and discuss further after that. And the student-centered learning also allows all of the students, regardless of their abilities, background, anything else, to bring in their own perspective to the learning process. So here, these are just a few examples of the different strategies that we use during this particular unit. Some classes will use a few, while other classes don't use the same ones. Everything really just depends on the class itself. The great thing about a lot of these strategies is that they're easy to incorporate in almost any content area, lesson, unit, project. And I will actually show you a few of these strategies and how they work in my classroom, and I'll explain a few of them a bit more in depth as well. I'd have to say probably the most used strategy in this particular project with all of my classes was the jigsaw, and that's because it's a great way to break down and chunk a large amount of information without overwhelming students with the tasks of reading and researching every single detail. This works really well when you have a large reading assignment to do. Students can be broken up into groups. They're each responsible for a certain part of the reading, and then they can come together to teach one another about what they've read. Another important thing to note when using these strategies, I don't hide them from the students. And I think students should be aware of what strategies they're taking part in because they should be playing an active role in their education. So I don't shy away from telling them, okay, we're going to jigsaw, we're going to do reciprocal teaching, who wants to be the fish for the fishbowl. The students kind of look forward to doing these certain activities because it is really centered around them. So don't shy away from letting them know what these strategies are called and how they're used. So as far as the teacher's role, there are several things that you can do during any of the activities that involve the student-centered strategies. One benefit is that you can lay all the groundwork early on. So students are practicing these strategies and you're free to work with students either individually or in smaller groups. A lot of times there are a few students here and there who will need just more support and more guidance. So it frees you up to work closely on making sure these students are successful. You can also go back and forth between all of the groups. You can help guide their research. You can guide their discussions. I oftentimes write on a sticky note if I notice they're a little bit off task or not quite gathering enough research or gathering enough information. I'll just write a little prompt and stick it on their Chromebook just to sort of get them steered in the right direction. Students can also take the information that you discuss with them in a smaller group or individually to a whole class discussion. And then the topics that you address with them often appear in their final products, which is obviously benefiting not only them, but the entire class. Of course, we know students don't always focus on the information that we want to make sure they learn. So we just steer them towards this information on a smaller scale, and it leaves them with that same sense of ownership in what's being shown in their projects. So these are the essential questions that I give all of the students at the beginning of this unit. Throughout their discussions in classwork, we refer back to them, and there are bigger picture ideas that I want them to think about, not only for this project, but also while we're reading the literature throughout this unit. So here are some strategies that are in use throughout this project. The first one here is just a simple brainstorming activity that I do with them as a do now right in the beginning of class. They think of something they already know about the Holocaust and then write it down on a sticky note, stick it up on the board, and wait for the next steps. If they don't know anything, which in some cases does happen, I have them ask a question about something they may be curious about or wondering about related to the Holocaust and write it down on a sticky as well, just so nobody's left out and nobody feels pressure to have some big revelation or know all of this information before we get started. It's also really nice because they don't have to put their name on it. It's anonymous. Okay, so our first mini lesson in this unit is a lesson on perspective. And this is a topic that comes up several times within the unit, not just within their research about the Holocaust, but also the stories we read. Writing from various perspectives is a skill students need to practice for their MCAS testing as well, so they get to practice some of these skills. And we start off by reading two versions of the Three Little Pigs. The first version is the original story, which I'm just going to open up for you here. As you can see, it is a children's book. It's illustrated. Nothing too crazy. Oftentimes the kids are excited to read a book that is below their grade level, so they buy into it pretty easily. The next story I'll just open up also is the story told from the wolf's perspective. I do have a few kids each year who have read the story already, but they're not exactly sure on the details, so I do have them just read through it again, and I'll sort of explain how that all works. Okay, so I have the class count off by twos, and one group reads the original version of the story while the other group reads the story from the wolf's perspective. They're paired up with someone who read the opposite story, and they're responsible for summarizing and asking questions with one another. They're asked to focus on the essential question I have here, which is how do decisions, actions, and consequences change depending on the different perspectives of the people involved. They're focused on that within their conversation. They talk about why perspective is important here and how it changes the information that's being shared. And I also have a short clip of some students using reciprocal teaching and collaboration in this mini lesson.
So between the stories, that different perspectives are both the wolf is portrayed as a quote unquote hero because he's doing nothing wrong, while in our story he's the villain because he tries to eat them.
So basically, they're both not completely different, but it has like similar.
So as you can see, those two students were discussing perspective in both of the stories. I know it's only a short clip, but it really does allow for a lot of interesting discussion, and you're easily able to pair students that work well together. This is especially useful when you have L students or students at different reading levels. You can pair them with someone that will help them with the comprehension and help them with relating the essential question to the story. So after all of that, they get into learning a little bit more background information about the Holocaust. I provide them with a very basic article from Common Lit. Students work on their annotation skills, and it's their first opportunity to practice deciding what information is important and interesting without guiding questions. I assigned this article without the questions, and I'll just open it up really quickly for you so you can see. Common Lit's a pretty great site for just some interesting articles that are grade level, reading level appropriate. And the article itself is fairly short. I assign it without the questions. Of course, you can use the questions, but I want them, again, to be responsible for deciding what's important and what they would like to discuss. So I don't want to give them too much information. I really just want them to focus on what they think is important. So after they've read and annotate, I ask them to turn and talk with a partner about what they've read and what information they deemed important. And this is a great opportunity for using the fishbowl strategy, especially with classes that may need some more supports. The fishbowl works with students in the middle. They're able to model how they annotated their notes, how they turn and talk with their partners. It's just a really easy way to model skills for other students. And it also, still in the 8th grade, they love being the center of attention. So giving a lot of the students the opportunity to be the fish in the fishbowl gives them more reason to participate and more reason to do a really good job with their annotations. And here is a clip that just shows two students who volunteered to be at the center of the fishbowl. They're reading the text together and they're choosing what to highlight and what to underline. Students on the outside watched and listened as they discussed the article. After practicing some of the strategies on a smaller scale with the materials that help students understand some facts about the Holocaust, students then will get into a more personalized research practice. We'll discuss topics they have come across as they read the article, and I pulled some of the topics from the sticky notes that they wrote on during their brainstorming practice, and they were allowed to choose groups of 4 to work in at this point. And while they were in their groups, each student chose 2 of 8 topics that we picked to concentrate on. So for people in a group, 2 topics each. They focused on just those 2. While they were in their groups, they were responsible for researching the topics they were assigned, and they added their findings to a Google slide. Once each member of the group was done with their 2 topics, the entire group was able to review the information for all 8 topics in their slides. So this allowed them to collaborate and cover all 8 topics without having the responsibility of researching and deciding which information to include for every single topic. It just allows for students to learn more within the time constraints. And then they can find just really good, solid information instead of just quickly finding the first thing that comes up, just in the interest of time. So I did want to show you the guided inquiry topics, and these are the topics we decided on as a class, and I listed them here, these 8. And then some exemplar slides. This is the final product for where they put their research. I did remove the students' names, and as you move through, you can see some students chose to write paragraphs. Some students chose to do more of a bullet point, but they got some pretty decent information about each topic and put a little blurb here. And the idea is that the entire class in their groups worked on a few of these slides, and then of course the other classes as well. All of these slides would get shared out with the rest of the grade, so they're able to use information from one another, which is the jigsaw strategy. And they can use that information in their final museum project as well. So now we move into the Socratic seminar. While students are researching in these groups, I also provided them with a notes organizer if they wanted one, and I explained that they would be able to use these notes for their Socratic seminar. The organizer gave some guided questions to help students decide what information they wanted to share. It prompted them to think about the essential questions and how they relate to their research. I also informed them that they could bring these notes to the seminar to read off of and to add on to. So I'm just going to show you what I gave them. As you can see, the note sheet here has our objective, which is to come to discussions prepared, having read or research material under study, explicitly draw on that preparation by referring to evidence on the topic, text, or issue to probe and reflect on ideas under discussion. So they have a very clear understanding of what a Socratic seminar looks like if it's successful. And in each section, I just sort of gave them a prompt, interesting ideas that they wanted to talk about, ideas and topics they needed to know more about, or questions they wanted to ask about since they didn't get to research every topic. This spot was the backside where they could ask questions because, as you know, in a Socratic seminar, they are not allowed to raise their hand or cut each other off. They just simply wait until it's their turn. And then how did the topics relate to essential questions? Can I answer any of the essential questions? So again, just pulling them back to those 3 essential questions that they're given at the beginning of the week. That way everything is just, continually repeated and brought up over and over again. As you know, they are forgetful. So with the Socratic seminar, one of the things I did was review the norms a couple of times, and I'll show you those in just a minute. 3 out of my 4 classes were really successful with the Socratic seminar, while 1 class required a bit more practice, but really that's totally fine because it's okay to have the students practice the skills until they get them right, and giving them the opportunity to try again doesn't hurt anything. It's important to let them to decide, however, if they felt their seminar was successful. So it's really giving them the opportunity to decide, was their seminar a success and why or why not, which I'll also get into a little bit. So I'm going to just show you the norms that I shared with the class, and they look like this. Just some guidelines. I went over them a couple of times. I went over them a few days before, the day before, and then right before, and I left them up on the board so students could refer back to them. Of course, you can edit these to fit your classroom needs. Students are able to decide, again, and take ownership over the seminar. And another way to really drive home the fact that this is a student-centered experience is resisting the urge to interject. I know it's hard to stand by and not throw in your 2 cents. Of course, you want them to talk about certain things and hit certain topics, but you really have to trust that they'll eventually get to where they need to be. Again, they're the ones deciding what they're interested in discussing and learning more about. They need to feel that sense of control and ownership in order to stay invested. And as students are talking, you can walk around. I was able to walk around and listen. I took notes about what I was hearing. And this really helped me determine which students were still struggling a bit with understanding some of the topics. If students were not participating, I would write some prompts on a sticky note and just kind of sneak it over to them to try to encourage them to share with the group. And yeah, it was fairly successful with most of my classes. Again, one class I did note that during their reflection, they stated they were not very successful, and I'll show you that as well. One other important thing I want to just note about this is that using a timer is great because they have no sense of time. When I told them that we were going to have a 30-minute seminar, they freaked out. They said no way. And all 3 classes that were very successful when that timer went off asked me for more time. And I did give them more time, but I did want to allow time for that student reflection and student feedback at the end. So just make sure, whatever time you have, you're able to give enough time at the end for student feedback, because that's a really important part of the seminar. So this clip is just one of my classes. It's a few minutes of their Socratic seminar. As you can see, we have some students in the middle. They're the ones who are kind of controlling the conversation, and everyone's allowed to participate, whether they're on the middle or the outside, which I know, depending on how you run your Socratic seminar, just in the interest of time and with the space that we have, it just works easier for us this way.
All the Jews were bad people that were a threat to their country. So that made so they started the Holocaust. And they made propaganda, which made everybody else try to think that the Jews were bad also. So does anybody want to further feedback?
For the propaganda, during the final solution, concentration camp and killing center officials compelled their prisoners to send letters to their families, saying that they were just being treated for diseases and going away for a while, when they were really going to concentration camps and killing centers to be killed.
And the perspective of the German children, censorship, where are you at?
I know.
They learned about different biologies, but once Hitler became the chancellor, he changed their biology to race science, which they were taught awful things about the Jewish people. And he changed their geography to geopolitics, which is the study of making their country superior to all else. And he made them read stories. One of them was the poisonous mushroom, which explained that you want to stay away from poisonous mushrooms if you don't want to eat them. So he made the poisonous mushroom the Jewish people, telling all the children that they can hurt you, don't like them because one day they're gonna kill you, and just stay away from them.
And it was the opposite.
Yeah.
So basically, he's trying to make, the adults he's trying to persuade to go with his ideas, but he knows that the children will respect adults and try to.
So he made schools learn about how Jews were so bad. Yeah, he changed all their education to different things about learning about him and respecting him because he's right.
So North Korea.
Yeah. So the only reason why the Holocaust ran so effectively is because it was literally all propaganda. Yeah.
Also, to spread awareness, newspapers would release little cartoons or scenes where Jews were just the bad guy and doing just horrible things in the cartoons. So then, if a child's reading a cartoon, they see a Jew doing this and that, and they just believe it. Oh, that's probably what they do in real life.
Is this where the video games
Okay, and I did want to show some of these sample notes from students who participated in the Socratic seminar. As you can see on the left, the student used the note sheet that I provided for them. They just jotted down some bullet points. It seems like they found concentration camps and Adolf Hitler the most interesting and important things that they wanted to share. And then on the right, this student decided to just have their own notes from research. They noted down perspective in the Holocaust, some information about Nazis. Looks like they had some questions about religion, but the important part here is that no matter how they jot their notes down, it's really interesting to see how much they're able to bring with them to the seminar and then how much they write during the seminar. They really enjoy learning from one another and they enjoy showing off what they learn. So I try to take advantage of that. And here's a copy of my notes. I was able to take these during the seminar. And as you can see, I was able to write down what students discussed. I could go back and review if we needed to talk a bit more about different topics. In one of my classes, they probably spent about 10 or 15 minutes talking about Hitler, and all of the other stuff sort of fell to the wayside. So I was able to jot that down and make a note that I needed to go back and make sure that they were understanding all of the topics, not just that one. I also left room at the bottom just to jot down some of the things they said during the reflection time. The notes on the left side are from the group that determined they had a pretty successful seminar, while the notes on the right are from the class that determined they did not achieve the success that they had hoped for. But this is an important part of the process too. You can drive home that idea that they are responsible for the success of this project. And if they're unprepared or not on task, it affects the rest of the group, which was actually noted during their reflection. I did allow this group to give the seminar another shot after a few days, and the second time around actually was, according to them, really much more successful. But you can see some of the things that I jotted down. They gave themselves a 6 out of 10. A lot of people didn't participate, could have done better, not prepared. So again, that feedback came from them. I did not say a word about any of my feedback, even though they begged me. They know exactly how well they did. They know if they participated. They know if they didn't participate. They know if they learned. And as you can see on the left side, this class in particular asked if we could do more Socratic seminars because they found it very useful and stated that they learned a lot. So after the Socratic seminar, I like to check in with them and just kind of do another brainstorming activity, because at this point they have a fairly solid grasp on the basics of what happened during the Holocaust. I had them jot down something new that they learned after working throughout the week on different activities and after the Socratic seminar. And I really love this type of check-in because you're able to see what each student took individually from discussions and activities, and they're all different. Oftentimes they're very personal. It's a great student-centered activity that really just takes a few moments at the beginning of class, but it gives you a great sense of where students are at in their learning. And as you can see from this image here, the students learned a lot during the Socratic seminar and during their weeks of research. And I loved this one in particular. One thing I learned during the seminar is that Jehovah's Witnesses, a type of religion, were targeted to be killed with Jews. I used to be a Jehovah's Witness, so this surprised me. And just seeing them making personal connections with the different things that happen, again, it gives them that greater sense of connection and ownership of the work that they're doing. So after all this, we move into a larger jigsaw and something called a gallery walk. This allows students to just concentrate specifically on one topic that they found most interesting, and they become experts on this topic. I provide them with a rubric and what we call a proposal sheet. They can decide what they want to research. Once they research and determine what they want to create as their exhibit, they begin constructing the exhibits. And at the end, every class compiles what they've got. They organize their artifacts. They set up their little corner of the classroom, and it turns into a museum. We also extend an invite to teachers, students, and other staff members within the school community so that they can also come explore the museum. And this really ties into that project-based aspect where now they're sharing with other members of the community all of the work that they've been doing. They're teaching it to students in other grades. They're teaching it to other staff members. The nice thing about this too, and this is how I try to time it every year, is that the end, this gallery walk we set up falls right around the same time as the International Day of Remembrance for the Holocaust. So I'm just going to show you the rubric I provide for them. Again, it has our goals at the top. It has some directions about how they can work. Most students are able to work with somebody else, another partner. Some prefer to work alone. This year I actually have quite a few students who want to work by themselves. I think they just really are interested in one particular topic and they don't want anyone else to get in the way of their research, which is also really cool to see. Most of the times they want to work in groups, so they have to do less. So I'm grading them here on these 4 criteria, and total it comes out to 100 points if they score 25 on all 4. And then I'm also going to show you the proposal that they have to fill out. I give this to them at the beginning of the week, and they have until the end of the week after they've done some research. And, oh, one of my students is on it right now, Kiva. And they're able to tell me what topic they want to work on, the names of the people they're working with, if any. I also put a spot here because I know a lot of students are unable to get a lot of supplies, so I do tell them if there's something that you need for your exhibit that you just don't think you can get, to write it down, and I'll do my best to figure out a way to get it. And then here I do give them a lot of choice on what they are able to create as their exhibit. There's just a lot of different options I've had in the past few years. A lot of students want to typically do something like a poster board or a diorama, but I do often get a lot of really creative ideas, so I tend to remember them and switch them out in the boxes here. If they think of something on their own, that's totally fine too. Like I said, they have until Friday to turn it in, and then I approve it, hand it back to them, and they can get started. So this is what our final product looks like. These are some pictures from a couple years ago. And the students that you see, some of them are the 8th grade students and some of them are younger. These kids came in and they're just taking a peek around the museum. This area here was playing a song that one of the students wrote from the perspective of a child who was Jewish. And this student here is just kind of teaching them a little bit about this topic that they've worked on. So you can see we've got kind of a full house here and everyone's walking around. And that's because, of course, we want to show the rest of the community, but they need to learn about the Holocaust as well, right? That's the whole point. Because they've become an expert on one topic, they haven't been as exposed to the other topics. So I give all of my classes a museum pamphlet. It looks like this if it opens. And basically, I change up the questions depending on the classes and depending on just different things, different topics that they decide on each year. But it folds into a little booklet. They're allowed to give their input because student feedback is part of their grade. And then these questions here guide them through the museum. So it's another way for me to kind of get them to focus on certain topics that I want them to focus on, but still giving them that freedom to decide what they're going to put down and how they're going to get their information, right? They can walk around the museum, they can go to all of the different exhibits, they can pick any 3 concentration camps. This is sort of their opinion, question. It just gives them sort of some guidance on what to look for, but also giving them the freedom to acquire the information at their own pace, which I think is important too. All right, so using these strategies during reading, obviously after we complete the museum and the students have learned the information that they need to learn, we move into the actual literature of the Holocaust. This whole project takes about 2.5 weeks to 3 weeks. It really depends. This year rather, we're getting cut off sort of right towards the end by Christmas break. So when they come back, I am going to give them a few extra days just because they'll be obviously trying to get back into the routine. But the Holocaust Museum project itself usually does take about 2.5 to 3 weeks. So after they've acquired this background knowledge, the student-centered learning doesn't stop. It actually continues when we move towards reading the text for Unit 2. Again, the classes are divided in half, just like they were in the beginning of the project. Half the class reads one text, which is The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, and the other half reads a different text, The Diary of a Young Girl. This comes in handy when you have a class with very different levels of abilities. You can sort of pick and choose who gets to read each book. You can give the students options if you don't have that problem. If everyone's reading, at an appropriate level, then they can choose which book they'd like to read. But they're responsible for their own reading requirements, and then they're paired up with a student who's reading the opposite book. So they're doing some reciprocal teaching, they're doing some turn and talk, there's some jigsaw action, some guided inquiry, and they continue to summarize, explain, discuss, ask questions, inquire. They're given questions and topics to explore, but because they're each using a different text, they discuss their findings and perspectives. They also come up with questions to ask one another about their texts. And then in addition to this, the honors class is actually given the task of reading another choice novel. I provide several books that deal with the Holocaust in this time period. They're from different perspectives. They're fiction, they're nonfiction, just something for every student, hopefully. But if they don't find something that they think they're interested in, I do allow them to go out and do a little research and find a book on their own. I've had a few students do that in the past. They read independently and then create a YouTube book review, which they share on our class YouTube page. Students are then responsible for watching and commenting on each other's videos. So again, the students are able to discuss their personal viewpoints and perspectives, their opinions, their feelings. They chose the book and they're able to give an honest and open review. So I'm really just providing them with sort of some guidelines and letting them read at their own pace, decide what they want to talk about. And they are so creative. Some of the book reviews that they've created in the past have just been amazing. So I'm just going to show you quickly the outline for the book review. I just list the tasks here. So I want them to create a script. I approve the script, and then they film the video. Now, as you can see, it should only it should at least be 1 minute and 30 seconds. So I'm not really asking them to do a full-blown theatrical performance, but I find that 1 minute and 30 seconds is usually way shorter than what they typically come up with. I've had students in the past with 10, 15, 20-minute videos, which is totally fine, obviously. But it's just interesting that with these types of student-centered projects, they really enjoy them so much more, and I always have them asking me, can I do more? Can I do more time? Which I love, and I'm never going to say no to. I'll sit and watch a 20-minute video because it's just, how could I not be excited about that? So the final step, or actually I'll just show you the classroom channel really quickly. Here's some book reviews that they've done in the years past. You can see some of them read a graphic novel here. Some of them read fiction, nonfiction, but they get to upload it and comment on each other's videos, which is awesome to see, and they give some good feedback too. All right, so just to recap everything, obviously the student-centered aspect of this unit really gives the students a sense of ownership, gives them a sense of pride in what they're creating, and it allows for the teacher to focus more on individual student needs. The project itself of the Holocaust Museum is the vehicle for teaching this information that the students need within the time constraints. This is something that my students hear me say all the time: work smarter, not harder. Time's always an issue, but these types of student-centered activities really do help. And then as an observer, obviously, the teacher can identify students who need extra supports. It's okay to fail. Practice is necessary. It's necessary for us. It's necessary for the kids. I think it's okay to show them that, it's okay to fail and they learn from these mistakes. And then, of course, all of these strategies just lead to an increased understanding and comprehension of the literature that we read moving forward in the unit. So that's pretty much where we're at right now. The students are going to be introduced to their books on Thursday of this week, and they're going to be presenting to the rest of the school on January 10th, hopefully, their museum. So we'll see how it goes with having Christmas break right in kind of in the middle of all of this. But I'm really excited so far about the work they've been producing. I've been really happy with the conversations I've heard, and I've been just really excited to see their final product. So thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for listening to me ramble. Hopefully none of this was confusing, but of course I'm able to answer any questions that you may have. And I do want to also take a moment before I stop this recording to thank Ashley McPherson and Darlise Montero and of course Mike Giroux for their help in making all of this possible with SeedCon. I always look forward to watching my colleagues, so thank you guys, and thank you anyone who is watching this. I hope that it was helpful in some way.